Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Trek Con with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Today, we have a long-time entertainment writer and part-time publicist, big-time Star Trek fan, Mr. Ian Spelling. How are you today, Ian?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Good. Good.
Also, by the way, my name is Ryan T. Husk. So, Ian Spelling, everybody's heard your name. Everybody's like, wait, Ian Spelling, didn't he do this? Or was it this? Or was it that? And it's yes to all of those things. Can we just start at the beginning before we get too deep into everything? Where did your love for Star Trek start? Was it Kirk fighting the Gorn? Was it Picard and the jellyfish? Where did this all start?
It was WPIX in New York, Channel 11, that had repeats of Star Trek at 6 and 11 o'clock. And I had a little black and white 13-inch TV that I watched it on. And then in the basement, this TV was so old, it was circular. And it had the big tubes in it. And that was our color TV. It was one of the first color TVs on the block, actually. Neighbors used to come over and watch my parents' TV. But anyway, to answer your question, that's where it goes back to, is the repeats of the original series. I'm going to guess mid-70s at that point that we're probably talking about. And then I started to get into journalism. And the long story, as short as I can give it to you, is the actors used to stay at the hotels in New York where the conventions were. So if I wanted to interview George Takei for my college paper, I would call the hotel, like the Friday of the convention, and say, can you put me through to Mr. Takei's room? Sure. They put me through. Hello. I'd say, George, my name's Ian Spelling. I'm with the Albany Student Press. Would you do an interview with me? And George said, sure, kid. Do you jog? I was like, I lied. I said, sure.
That's what you do. You say yes to everything.
Exactly. And he met me in Central Park. Actually, nope, he met me at the hotel, the Sheridan over by Central Park. He ran 6 miles. I ran 3. So I ran 1.5 miles. Then he went around the reservoir. Then we went the 1.5 miles back to the hotel. And then he changed. I sat in the room waiting. And when he was done, we sat and did an interview for an hour. And I did it for my college paper. Walter Koenig did the same thing for me. I met with him and his daughter at a diner by LaGuardia Airport. And I ran that in my college newspaper. And then the big one that changed everything, I had also done Jimmy Doohan, Mark Leonard as well. Were both really kind, talking to a college kid for my newspaper. But the big one was Gene Roddenberry. I met Majel and Gene at a convention in New York. And Majel sat with me for 10 or 15 minutes and did an interview. Gene said to me, listen, I don't have time to do this now. Here's my business card. He hands me his business card. He says, call my assistant. And I said, okay, tell her I said yes to an interview with you and we'll make it happen. So we set a day and time and I'm all set to do this interview. And I come back to my suite up in SUNY Albany where I went to college. And there's a note on the door. Gene Roddenberry called. Has to postpone the interview. Here's his home number. Just give him a call and he'll reschedule. Wow. So I call and Roddenberry picks up the phone and he says, yeah, a director friend of his had passed away and he had to go to the funeral. So let's just do this tomorrow. What's your number at the school paper? I'll call you so you don't have to pay for the call. Wow. This was like 1985, I'm going to say. And, reality was at the time, it was like $1 a minute for a phone call. So it was lovely of him to do this, right? And sure enough,
he could afford
I called. Yeah, but the thing you have to remember is he personally tracked me down. There was no directory. There was no, white pages for a kid at college. He found the front desk at the school and said, can you please give me Ian Spelling's room number and his line? And they put him through. It was the craziest thing. And I mentioned this to Majel one time. She's like, I have no idea what you did right, but he must have liked something he saw or heard in you that he did all of that. True stories. Swear on a stack of Bibles. It was great.
Unbelievable.
And I sold both of those interviews, Gene and Majel, to Starlog. And that led to my relationship really building with Starlog. I had done a piece on Cocoon and I had done a piece on Clan of the Cave Bear. I had sold him Tawny Welsh from the original Cocoon and James Remar from Clan of the Cave Bear, that movie with Daryl Hannah. and then Gene and Majel were next. And that's where I'll cut the story short, just because that's what led to 25 years plus of writing for Starlog and for Dave McDonald, and for the licensed magazines, which was where I first met you, Sirach, was for Starlog and the licensed magazines. They did the Deep Space Nine. Starlog did the Deep Space Nine magazine. So that's where it all started.
I remember those. I still have some Starlog
Lucky.
issues. And, yeah, in my
odds
possession.
are I did the interview with you. And I know you and I also did it for New York Times Syndicate as well. I was doing a weekly column about Star Trek called Inside
Chief
Trek.
O'Brien, huh? He was there every week.
And and it was great. But yeah, that's a whole other story. I did that for 20 years for the New York Times Syndicate. And what happened was that I did a set visit to, I think it was the second episode of Deep Space. And that sold so well that the New York Times Syndicate said, what do you think of the idea of a weekly column? And I said, it's great. I wish I'd thought of it. And they said, yeah, we're thinking of asking somebody to do it. I'm like, all right, you asked me about it.
But New York Times Syndicate, is it the same as the New York Times?
It's the wire service. It exists and it doesn't in its previous form. The New York Times Syndicate was the wire service owned by the New York Times. So it was created to syndicate New York Times articles. And the New York Times at the time owned a ton of different papers. So I ended up writing a weekly entertainment piece for them. So a celebrity interview. And then one of those features was a set visit to Deep Space Nine. That sold so well that they came up with the idea of the weekly column. And then it ultimately came to me, do you want to write it? And that ran for over 1,000 weeks. I mean, it ran for a long time, about 20 years. And at the beginning, it was all Star Trek. It was called Inside Trek. And then after Enterprise kind of went away and the Star Trek flame died a little bit for a while, it became Inside Trek and Sci-Fi and then Strange Worlds, so that we could cover the whole sci-fi and horror spectrum. So all of a sudden I was covering Lord of the Rings and things like that as well.
I'm listening.
There you go. So it was great stuff. So anyway, sorry, I tend to go off on tangents, get used to it.
It was great stuff.
So it became Strange Worlds and then eventually became Strange New World.
Yep.
So I mean,
yes, who knew, right? Exactly. And there's one of the books is called Inside Track, and that was the original name of the column too.
I love that. I love that title, Inside Trek. It's very clever. Ian, I know you as pretty much the preeminent journalist in the business. So when I think of a journalist in this industry, I think of you.
Thank you. But that's probably from personal experience. In your Star Trek realm, I was probably the guy who spoke to you the most. I'm guessing you also spoke to Mike Logan, who did TV Guide. He did a lot of the TV Guide stuff, and I think he wrote for other outlets as well. But yeah, back in the day, in the 90s, when that was part of your world, if it was for the New York Times, if it was for the Deep Space Nine magazine, if it was for Starlog, odds are I would probably have been the guy chatting with you at the time. So yeah, and we started to talk about this before the show. But you and your mom came to the Bender, Goldman, and Helper offices. Was that Santa Monica? Whatever. It was L.A. And that's where you and I did our first interview, is a sit-down chat. And then I saw you on the set, and we've done phoners over the years, and I've moderated your panels in Vegas. So it's full circle, man, to do this with you. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it is great. I mean, and the irony is, when you were interviewing me as a kid, who knew that my character would eventually become a journalist? And so I was actually following your footsteps.
That's lovely to hear. That makes me feel old, but it's great to hear. Thank you.
That's great. No, so yeah, I know you, Ian, as pretty much, when I think of journalism, I think of interviews, I think of you and the work that you've done over the years. You've earned a lot of credibility in that department. And I mean, the relationships that you've built throughout the years, I mean, it goes up and down from, all aspects of production in Star Trek.
It did. I mean, part of the thing that I always wanted to do was cover everything in the Star Trek realm when I had the opportunity. And taking this a step further, from 2010 to 2019, I was the editor of StarTrek.com, the official Star Trek site that CBS ran. And so
Heard of it.
yeah,
That's
that was
pretty
part
big
of
deal.
that was part of my mandate was I want to, if obituaries are a sad thing to talk about, but the reality was I said to my boss, who has sadly passed away, I would like to, anytime anybody associated with the franchise passes away, regardless of whether people actually know who they were, I would like to do a tribute to them. And he said, I totally agree. Go ahead. So, Michael Dorn's stuntman passed away a few years ago. I emailed Michael. I said, can you give me a quote about this guy? He said, oh, it's wonderful that you're doing a tribute to him. Absolutely. And sent me stuff. I've done pieces on the sound guys. I've done, and not just obituaries, but features on them as well. Sound guys, craft services, the extras people, the costume designers, because the show doesn't, it happen. You guys, the actors, are the face of the franchise. But there's a gazillion people behind the scenes who are making that happen. So the reality is, for a magazine, of course, you want Avery or Patrick or Shatner, whoever, on the cover of the magazine because they'll sell the most issues, right? But for a website, we were able to broaden that significantly because internet needs content. So it worked out perfectly that we could show love to a lot of people who might not otherwise get it. And that was always a lot of fun to do. And everybody appreciated it because how often did the sound operator, the boom guy, get to be interviewed by anybody? So LZ, the security guy, I spoke to him. I did a piece for Starlog that was called "The Day in the Life of Star Trek," and I got there at like 7 a.m, and I stayed until around 7 or 8 at night. And I spoke to everybody who made it happen. Like I said, from craft services to LZ to whoever was acting, to the directors, to the sound guys. I went over to the editing bay. I then went over to Rick Berman's office and sat with Rick for a while. It was one of my favorite pieces that I ever did. And we ran it like a time clock, 8 a.m., 8:45, 9:12, that kind of a thing, right till the end of the day when I drove through the gate at Paramount and exited. One of my favorite pieces that I ever did. A lot of work.
Right. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah.
Spend the whole day there and jump around different departments and just see the inner workings.
See what they do and how they do it.
Ian, I wanted to ask you, because you have so many of these different aspects of journalism that you do, and you may have been asked this several times before or thought it yourself, but do you have a favorite thing that's the most interesting or most fun for you to do specifically, whether it's a phone call interview or an in-person interview or moderating a panel at Star Trek Las Vegas, which would probably be my that's a front runner for me, I would think, or whether it's being interviewed or working for StarTrek.com in general. I mean, was there something to where you just get up a little bit more for that one because this is your main thing?
I love all of it. It's all been interesting pieces. For a Star Trek fan like myself to be the editor of StarTrek.com was ridiculously fun. It was a great time to reconnect with everybody that I had met over the years who I maybe hadn't seen or spoken to or communicated with. The inaugural person who helped us launch the site was Leonard Nimoy. And Nimoy wrote a 4-sentence introduction that we posted on the site the first day it went live, and in 2010, that summer. And I emailed Leonard and I said, "Hey, Leonard, it's a little short. Can I embellish it with you and for you?" And he said, "Sure." And so I put words in Leonard's mouth and sent them to him to sign off on. And he said to me, and I had known him over the years. I was not pretending we're like friends or buddies, but we were friendly. And he said, "Listen, Ian, you have my email, you have my phone number, you know where to reach me. Don't abuse the privilege, and you can reach out to me anytime you need to." So, that was awesome. So if I had a question, okay, what happened in this episode? Or can you confirm or deny this? Or my boss and I, when they had the Intrepid in New York City, the warship, and then they had a Star Trek, they had one of the shuttlecrafts on the Enterprise, which was really cool. Leonard did the voice for it, but he wasn't feeling well enough to come in for it. So I'm sitting there with my boss, and I emailed Leonard, and I said, the only thing I'm missing from this article is a quote from you. 5 minutes later, I had this fabulous quote from Nimoy. I mean, he went out of his way to be supportive and helpful. That was the kind of thing that worked out beautifully. You know what I mean? And I communicated with him. Obviously, I gave him his space when I knew he was sick near the end. But I just sent him a note. He had done a special about Boston. And so I wanted to get that information right for him in that piece, because it was about his whole youth and early days in Boston. And so, sure enough, even I'm assuming he was pretty sick at that point, he took the time to answer that, which was absolutely remarkable to me. And so that was the answer to your question, was probably the 9 years at StarTrek.com. There were conventions that I went to, and I don't even know if you can see them on my wall behind me, but like the all access pass to the official conventions.
Wow.
You know, there would be kids in wheelchairs who couldn't be on the line long enough. And I would just go over to the photo people and say, let me take a photo off the table. And then I would go to the front of the line and say to Jerry Ryan, hey, Jerry, there's this kid here. He's not feeling great, or he's got an issue that he or she can't stay on line for an hour and wait. Is it okay if I just bring this person to the front and you can just say hello or take a quick photo or sign an autograph? And to a man and a woman, anybody I did that with from the casts always said yes, of course, and gave them a minute. And that was a wonderful thing to be able to do on my end of the world. There was a kid who was obsessed with Jerry, loves Jerry, and he was autistic. And he could rattle off everything about Jerry and about the character. So I just off the table grabbed like 7 or 8 photos of Jerry, and I gave it to the mom because the kid was online to meet her and wanted to wait, actually. So I just gave this woman like 7 or 8 photos of her, and I had autograph passes, and I just gave her a few of those and said, knock yourself out type of thing. So that was kind of the fun, really fun part of doing all of that. And then you had mentioned the moderating. That was a total accident. I'm not the guy who does interviews. I'm the guy who conducts them. I'm not a public speaker. I never wanted to be up on the stage. That was a total accident. Creation asked me repeatedly, Gary and Adam at Creation asked me, we think you'd be really good at this. You should do it. And I said, nah, I'm a little scared. Don't want to get up on stage, blah, 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 blah. And they asked me again. And after I can't remember, it was the second, and I realized 3 strikes and you're out, or it was the third time. I said no, and they said, we may ask you one more time, and that's it.
This is the Commander Riker syndrome right here you're describing.
Correct. I finally said, you know what? Shit or get off the pot, right? So I got off the pot, and I did it. And I just asked them to do me a favor, start me on the secondary stage at the Vegas convention. Let me do that. It's a smaller room. And then when they said, okay, we want you to do the bigger stage, I said, can I do it with somebody I know at 10 a.m. on Sunday, so the pressure isn't quite as on. And
so the 10 a.m. Sunday pressure is a little lower.
Right. So Anthony Montgomery and I did it, and I was able to communicate with Anthony beforehand and go over questions, and he made it easy. He's a great guy. He's really easygoing. He knew the rules. Don't ask a yes or no question because you may get a yes or no answer. That kind of thing. Right? It's the worst thing you can do, right?
Yeah. Yes.
He was exactly. He was great, and that made it easier. And then I got thrown into the fire when they announced Discovery, is what happened. My boss said, all right, Ian, we're going to have all the brass. The room's going to be filled with all 6,000 people. We're doing the Discovery panels. And so I had a couple of the makeup guys who did the Klingons and the masks and all of that from Discovery.
Glenn Hetrick, possibly.
Yep. And it was crazy because I was terrified. I had the CBS brass there. That wasn't my territory. I was used to talking to actors.
And if Discovery was not out yet, what do you ask?
Right. So
we don't have any reference.
We were showing preview stuff. They were allowed. They brought the art. And so I also had to oversee that with a clicker to make sure the art played on time. There were a lot of moving pieces to that. Jordan Hoffman did a couple of the actors, and I think it was Scott Mantz did 1 or 2 of the other interviews. So they had the 3 of us handle that block of 4 hours straight of Discovery introductions for the fans. And so once I had spoken in front of 6,000 people and didn't screw it up, all of a sudden the fear was gone, and now I really enjoy doing it. So that's been great.
Oh,
yeah. You're like the Steve Jobs of Discovery, kind of breaking the new iPhone coming out.
You know what I was thinking is you're kind of in a lot of ways, Ian, and I know Sirach, you had a question to ask, but I just had to throw this in. You're in a lot of ways, and I don't know if you realize this, but it's when you were doing StarTrek.com, kind of like the press secretary for Star Trek, because you are in your own way disseminating the information to the fans. And so you can spin it however you want it, or you can focus more on one thing or the other. But in a lot of ways, you are shaping Star Trek fandom and their views on Star Trek. So that's got to be a pretty heavy burden, but also pretty exciting when there are some great things Star Trek is doing and you get to be that voice to bring it out to the people. It's got to be great.
It was great. Just bear in mind, though, it was the official site. So certain things were under embargoes, certain things had to be worded very specifically, certain things had to be approved in advance with anything new specifically, actually. If I wanted to, Sirach, when you opened your restaurant, I did a piece on you opening your restaurant. I was able to do that. When George Takei was doing Allegiance on Broadway, I said, again, with my boss's blessing, let's go, full throttle on this. So I went to a rehearsal and watched them do it. I went to opening night and spoke to Robin Quivers and Howard Stern and whoever the guests were. And Nana Visitor was there as well, and whoever was in town for the opening. And we did a piece on that. And then they had a press day for the show. So I did an elaborate full 2-part interview with George, which was fabulous. So, I was able to do that. And that was really cool too. But that wasn't official stuff, right? Whereas if there was going to be casting on Picard, we sometimes knew in advance and had to be very careful about how we announced that. And the photos had to be very specific. And if there were new products that were licensed, that had to be written and disseminated a certain way as well.
Ian, how has the industry changed from the first, block of the legacy Star Trek to now this new era of Star Trek? What are some of the things that you see different in your profession?
It's the internet that's changed everything, honestly. Back in the day, there was Starlog, there was Cinefantastique. I think Sci-Fi Magazine came later. There were a handful of magazines. And then some of the big ones, TV Guide, would obviously cover TNG and Deep Space and Voyager and things like that as well. But the original StarTrek.com that Larry Nemechek was involved with, that kind of shut down as well back when everything closed. All the Star Treks were done. There was really nothing out there for an official site to support. And that changed after the JJ movies, after the first one in 2009, when everybody said, we have this property, why don't we reboot the website? But the reality is there's a million Star Trek websites out there now. I mean, you both know this better than anybody. And, anybody who knows how to use the internet well can create a podcast, a video type of interview system.
Even if you don't know how to work the internet well, we can still do a podcast, right?
Right. We can fake it.
Exactly.
We could fake it. So the internet is the answer to your question, because honestly, just for example, if there's a press day for one of the new Star Trek shows, there'll be 20 or 30 internet people there. If you go to a red carpet for any Star Trek events, whether it's a new show or a museum opening like the Skirball out in LA that they did not too long ago, there's a gazillion and one Star Trek site, which is great. The more, the merrier. But remember, it's that type of thing is there were times where certain other sites would scoop us at StarTrek.com because we couldn't publish something that hadn't been officially announced yet. So there were literally times where you'd see, just for argument's sake, one of the movies, people took photographs. They caught photographs of, Zachary Quinto, trying to hide his costume on the set of one of the movies. We could not run that.
I remember
right?
these leaks. Yeah.
Correct. The official site was not allowed to run that in any way, shape,
So
or form.
they beat you to the story then, the leaked.
Right. And
people.
that is the bane of any print publication, newspapers and magazines existence, is they can be beat by somebody at TMZ posting a photo or the news, right? They're going to, anytime somebody passes away, it's always TMZ first, right?
Yeah.
They're looking for that kind of news. And
so is that your biggest challenge, to get out to be the exclusive breaking of stories and making sure that the thing is tight?
Not anymore. There were times where we did want to be first. Again, this is specifically a StarTrek.com, and my reign there stopped in 2019. But there were times where it didn't matter if we were first, because it was official and we had to do it the way we had to do it. We weren't sitting there counting clicks or trying to generate news. We wanted to be accurate. We wanted to be factual. We wanted it to be approved. But all the other stories, we had more or less, we did 2 stories a day, 7 days a week for the Star Trek website back in the day. And then if there was breaking news, if somebody passed away, if there was an announcement made, it could go up. But generally speaking, we did 2 a day. And we would have a meeting where we'd plan an editorial calendar, just like I'm sure you guys do. Okay, what are we going to have in this podcast that we're doing today? And you put it together. So that's basically what we did. And there just had to be room to say, okay, we know this product is coming out on January 27th. Let's make sure we have space on January 27th. This one's coming out February 5th. All right, we just did a book. Maybe we put that off a week. That kind of a thing. And we would work with the licensees to time everything accordingly.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like the problem there is inevitably in this business, there are always going to be some delays. You don't know which one's going to get delayed or what's going to happen. And now suddenly you have to scramble. Okay, wait, now this is no longer March 3rd. It's April 15th. And so, okay, well, what can we put in that place? And how do we, I feel like there'd be a lot of last minute scheduling changes, or maybe it was just planned out to a T, but it seems like there would be some issues there every once in a while.
It was both, Ryan. There was a book called Star Trek 101 that Terry and Paula wrote, right? Paula Block and her husband Terry, and that is literally, it says Vulcans and an explanation. It said Captain so and so and an explanation of who and what they are, and put that in some sort of context for newcomers. So I always used that. I had those ready to roll as evergreens.
Perfect.
I would have a pile of Dave McDonald wrote a guest blog for me on a regular basis that we ran about his days at Starlog and the Star Trek people that he interacted with, and they were really fun, deep, in-depth pieces. He wrote 30 or 40 or 50 of them over the time that I was with StarTrek.com, and I had a stack of them ready to go. He'd send them to me, I'd edit them, and whenever I needed to drop one in, because as you said, something switched or dropped or whatever, I just dropped it in. That wasn't as big a deal as you would think it is. We had cannonballs ready to put in the cannon. Let's put it that way.
Don't say canon to Star Trek fans. What were you going to say, Sirach?
Double N, my friend. Double N.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you brought up Paula Block, and I just wanted to say that I remember she was in the licensing building at Paramount, wasn't she?
I think so. It was Paula and her husband, Terry, and they wrote the Deep Space Nine books, so they probably spoke to you, right?
They did, but I think I would go see the licensing people all the time, and because I would go there to kind of recruit them for free goodies and stuff. I wanted
action figures.
I wanted action figures. I wanted toys. I wanted all the merchandising stuff that they had, and they had that stuff laying around the office all the time.
Too funny.
So I would always be over there. And Paula was so good with me as a kid, just kind of like, she always would walk me around the offices over there and, basically treat me like a kid in a candy store. And
Literally.
so
Literally.
I have fond memories of Paula. Not so much Terry that much that I remember him being there all the time, but I do remember seeing Paula on a regular basis. And also, like we mentioned earlier, with the Bender, Goldman, and Helper, the publicist on Star Trek was also Jennifer Weingraf. I remember Jennifer being there, and she had all the photographs of the stills, and if you wanted still shots from or headshots, she had all of that stuff. And but she was also really cool to hang out with. So I used to spend time hanging out in these different departments, just shooting the shit with people and just being a curious kid. But obviously you were doing a lot of that as well, kind of in every nook and cranny in this whole Star Trek universe. But you said you're usually the one asking questions, but in the documentary, Ira was interviewing you.
Yes.
What was that? What was that like?
That was wild. I got an email saying, "Do you want to participate in this?" And I said, "Of course. What do you need?" And they said, "We're interviewing pretty much everybody and anybody." And I remember reaching out to them months after it and saying to Dave Sapone, "Did I make the cut? Am I in it?" He's like, "Ian, we got to send you the trailer." It's my voice in the trailer, which was just, I'm at a movie theater watching a movie, and up comes the trailer for that. And I was, all right. And I think I've got like a minute and a half of screen time, but it was the trailer part that cracked me up the most. And that was a pleasure to be a part of. I was honored to be asked. Rick Berman and Ira were great to me during the run of the show. I did one cool interview where we had the entire cast together at one time, which was really cool. I was an extra in an episode as well. So that was really cool.
This was on Deep Space Nine, right?
Yeah, I was on Deep Space Nine and Voyager as an extra because I wanted to do a day in the life of an extra on the show. So that's what we did. I was a Bajoran, so I'm on the bridge. Yeah, I'm in ops, and I'm standing
I
behind.
see this now. You're in the gray Bajoran thing. Looks like you're holding a pad. And then you were an alien I don't recognize in Voyager. What was that?
Oh my God, I can't remember. The episode was Innocence. I am trying to remember what species I was.
You know what? I'm gonna pull up the picture. The Star Trek fans will recognize it. They're gonna say, "Oh yeah, the alien from Innocence, of course."
Doesn't it say? Is it in there?
Yeah, it's got to with these interesting little makeup ridges here. Coming right here. Look, he's behind column on on Deep Space Nine's ops.
Guy, look at the hair. That's a toupee.
Look at the hair.
That's a toupee. Hair club for men, ladies and gentlemen. Hair club for men. And it had a nickname.
The Ron DeSantis hair right there. Look at
that was my own toupee. And
that was yours. Oh.
Yes. In hindsight, I wish we had not done it. But I will tell you, one of the greatest, you asked about highlights, was Mike Westmore coming in to check my hair and makeup.
Nice.
That was super cool. Mike's a great guy. I knew it then. I know it now. And to have him, the Oscar winner, Raging Bull, Mask, all of these things, come in and check, little old Ian Spelling, was unbelievably cool. And I actually found photos. When I did that, Starlog sent a photographer with me. That was part of my day in the life thing. And so they let me bring a photographer. I think it was Robbie Robinson. No, it was Robbie Robinson was the photographer. And Robbie Robertson is the singer. Robbie Robinson was the photographer who has since passed away. And
he passed away, huh?
Yeah, years ago now. And Robbie took the photos of me on set, and all of a sudden I found them. Bender had them made. So literally it says, property of Paramount Pictures, blah blah blah, and it says Ian Spelling on it. I might even have them over here.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I have them to my left as we speak.
Yeah, because Robbie was always there taking still shots of episodes.
Do you remember? It was
every
a box.
time.
It was
box,
a camera
quiet.
in a black box. Right.
Yeah.
So the clicking didn't interrupt the shoot.
Right.
You are correct, my friend. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was fun.
And he was a cool guy. He was like one of those, like, you know, he dressed like a Marlboro man with a vest.
And he had slicked back hair, right?
Yeah.
Like wavy blonde hair. Yeah. Yeah.
He was a cool guy.
He was a nice guy.
Yeah, Robbie was a very good guy. Ian, has there been any, without, have to name any names, but you've been saying how cooperative, and, Gene Roddenberry went and sought you out. You mentioned Rick Berman and Ira and all of these people being so helpful. You don't have to name names, but have you ever run into resistance? Has there been anybody who's avoided talking to you, or?
He laughs.
Well, the answer is, of course, yes. You're going to run into people who are either reluctant to talk to anybody. Look, Avery was always tough. I talked to Avery during that second set visit that I did. First set visit to the second episode, and he spoke to me. And I did one or two other interviews with him, and I did a phoner when he did something in Atlanta that he wanted to promote. And I said, "Look, I'll do it in my column." And that
was the Black Arts, the National Black Arts Film Festival. I think that's what it was.
Yeah,
National Black Arts Festival.
Yes, right. And wasn't he like the curator of it or something along those lines?
Yeah, he was the manager or the director of the Black Arts Festival. Yeah.
So I said, look, the column was 900 words. I will devote half of the column to what he wants to talk about if he'll talk to me a little bit about Star Trek. So literally in the full 7-year run of the show, I maybe spoke to him 4 times, whereas everybody else was more readily available and willing to talk. And that was nothing personal with me. As you know, he did not do a ton of interviews. Yeah. So I just never took that personally. There was one actress who I had a falling out with for a couple of years. She was upset that something ran in the magazine that she said, and she thought it was off the record. And I played the tape back. It wasn't. But eventually, she let it go. I let it go. And, we were friends for many, many, many years after that. There was another actor who there was an issue with for a time, and same thing, time passes and you have bigger things to worry about, is really what boils it down. And the other truth is, look, I'm the guy who needs the interviews. So there's nobody unless, they did something horrible, which nobody ever did. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to talk to that person. Right. You know what I mean? So if there was ever an issue, it more had to do with somebody's just not doing interviews now, or, look, Colomini never wanted to do interviews very often. Just not his favorite thing to do. I did one interview with him where we were having a sit down face to face in it's either England or Germany. I can't remember off the top of my head. And we were having a great time actually doing the interview. And then he got a text and he said, Ian, I need to grab this. And when he came back, the second half of the interview, I could tell he was focused on whatever that he was dealing with from the text. And the rest of the interview was shorter answers and more to the point. And, you could almost tell that the interview, when I wrote it, went in 2 different directions because it was a Q&A. And the first half is replies like this, and the second half is 2
yes, no.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
No.
It's yes or
more
no.
or less, without asking yes or no questions. Exactly.
You're right.
Yeah.
Got to know what that text was.
Right. But how can I be mad that, the guy's living his life? He's something came up and, he was being kind enough to give me the time. So what can I do about that? Nothing.
Now, Ian, before we go, we have a couple minutes left, but you touched on it. You said, you were an extra twice on 2 different sets. Usually when you talk to an actor that's, doing background work for the first time, or somebody that's doing something like that hasn't done it before, the first thing they notice is, man, I cannot believe how many times you do the same freaking thing over and over and over, and for lighting, for lines, for the director, for the act, like over and over. But you'd been around sets, so you probably already kind of knew what to expect. But was there something that you just kind of didn't? Was it just a thrill to just have makeup put on you? Was it were you surprised at how bright the lights were? What were your impressions there?
I remember doing Deep Space and just being really impressed by how realistic ops felt. That was the crazy thing. You didn't really need to pretend a lot other than the view screen, where you were just literally looking at an empty black space that was going to be filled in later. Beyond that, I mean, you didn't need to pretend very much. Again, other than pressing buttons that don't do anything and lights that don't do anything. It was, Sirach, back me up here. The Deep Space Nine set was insane. It was its own village unto itself. Unbelievable set, glorious, production design on that. And I mean, and it lasted for years. And even the sets that moved in and out, just walking through the halls. And there was nothing cooler than me. They did a costume fitting for me. Somebody bought on one of those auctions. It's a wrap, I think it was called. They bought my uniform from my wearing a Bajoran. So somewhere in there it says, spelling in the collar. It was the coolest thing. I remember having fun. I remember Mike Westmore again doing the makeup for me and double checking it. I remember a lot of the actors saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Berman let me be an extra." I'm like, and they're like, "Okay, cool." And we took a photo. There's a great photo that the Bender Goldman Helper people got, which was, I think it was. Let's see, it was Avery, Terry. Let me think who else was in the shot. Nana, and I'm going to say Cullum, and then help me with the name of the woman. Do you still have it up, Ryan? Hanik was the name of the character. The woman with the hair, the crazy kind of red bun at the top. All of us posed for that photo. And I don't know if it was Jolynn, the assistant publicist, or if it was Diane, the head publicist at the time, sent me the 8x10 autographed by everybody. She had the photo printed and signed by everybody. And that's a favorite. If I had thought of that, it's in a pile somewhere next to me in one of my photo albums.
So Diane Castro.
Yeah, Diane Castro.
Shout out to Diane. What an amazing woman. Yeah. Awesome. It's so amazing. And I pick up some. You're a New Yorker, right?
Yep.
Because there's some undertone of your accent that reminds me of Ira. Do you guys ever exchange New York stories?
Nice Jewish boys from New York is basically what we're talking about. Yes, he's from the Bronx. I'm from Long Island. So he would say that my voice is a little higher. I would say his voice is a little deeper and guttural. But yes, we've had that conversation. I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I had to interview, oh my God, Ian, why am I forgetting her name? Patti Smith, or Patti Smythe, actually, not Patti Smith. The kind of, right, Patti Smythe, who had, she was in the group Scandal back in the day. And I was interviewing her for a performance that she was doing in New York City at BB King's. And she's married to John McEnroe. And we get on the phone and she says, "Are you from Merrick?" We're literally a minute and a half into the interview. "Are you from Merrick?" And I'm like, "Yes." She said, "You sound like our late bassist, who was from Merrick, a nice Jewish boy from Merrick." And there's Patty. Yep.
There it is.
Yeah. And she
nailed you down to the
I'm like,
that's amazing.
To the zip code. She's
Merrick.
like, she knows.
Didn't say Long Island. Didn't say Nassau County. I mean, hit the,
it's a little deeper.
It's
a little further down in Long Island, if I remember correctly. Sirach, our buddy Frank Zanka is also from Merrick.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you know who else is from Merrick? Amy Fisher, if you remember the whole Joey Buttafuoco thing.
Yes.
Right? I think,
Claim to fame.
Right?
Yeah.
Then we have Lindsay Lohan is from Merrick.
Wow. Heard of her.
And Debbie Gibson is from Merrick.
That's some electric youth right there.
It is some electric youth. Very good.
I would say that makes you Captain America.
Ooh.
Sorry, I had to throw
boy.
Right?
We'll edit that out. Don't worry.
He did not practice that because it only just came up that I'm from Merrick. So,
exactly.
Very impressive. Very
funny
impressive.
thing is, I tried to avoid that because I caught myself when I said you know who else is from Merrick? And I was like, that sounds like I'm saying America. But Ian, this has been so much fun. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And I also especially love this little thing you did when Sirach said, "You're from New York, right?" And you went, "Yeah." Like there's like a little New Yorker. You had your arm. You're like, "Yeah." Like what of it?
What about it?
What about
I loved it. It was this tiny little bit of New York that came out there.
Yeah.
Wait, you talking to me?
Yeah,
That's right.
Exactly.
Anyway,
no, this is great, guys. Sirach, I've known you for a million years. I mean, I remember talking to you when you did that Showtime basketball program.
Oh yeah, Hoop Life.
Yeah, when you had your restaurant.
Toronto.
You've been there the whole time, and like I said, Ian, I think of you when I think of anybody in this profession. You're the poster boy in my mind of journalists, of also the kind of class and grace and etiquette that you have. That should be, I want to say that I admire that about you. You've always been professional. You've always been personal. And yeah, man, you're the gold standard. So I appreciate it, knowing you and just, having you part of my life.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. And obviously I appreciate all the time you've always given to me to chatting as well. I can't do my job if you don't help me. Mm-hmm. Is really what it boils down to. So I've always appreciated it.
It's a pleasure.
Ryan, you're okay too.
Thank you. They call me the copper standard. All right. Big thanks to Ian. Gold standard spelling. That's got to be your middle name. I love it. Your nickname.
There you go. Anything we didn't cover that you want to slap in there?
No.
Next time we get a chance to interview you, we're going to cover more. I'd love to have another chance to talk with you.
Like hopefully there will be this was supposed to be a line of books. And
let's talk about that real quick. Actually, that was definitely something we don't want to wait for next time. We'll wait for next time is I keep seeing in your background this really cool thing from obviously a baseball stadium, and I'm like, I got to know more about that because I love that kind of stuff. But tell us about the book, please.
So, Eagle Moss, Hero Collector, which was the publishing division of Eagle Moss, Ben Robinson said, "Look, we have to do another book. I don't have time to do it." The Voyager book had done very well. The next one was going to be the original series. And Ben, I was doing PR for them at that point. And Ben said to me, "Do you want to co-write the TOS book with me?" And I said, "Absolutely. It's always been one of my fantasies to write a book." So I ended up helping out on a few chapters of a Battlestar Galactica book for Eagle Moss. But that was 95% written. And I just came in at the end and helped them get some stuff over the finish line. But the Celebration book was literally a 50-50 writing project for both Ben and for myself. And we had a great time doing it. And we interviewed a bunch of people just before they passed away. And it was great to get their story included in the book. And the reaction to it was great. It got nice reviews. It sold well. I believe that Amazon is officially out of copies of it. And not that they're quote unquote collector's items, but with Hero Collector no longer being an entity, there may or may not be reprints anytime in the future. If somebody else takes over the license and wants to do more books, then they may. I was in the middle of doing a next gen book. And so hopefully that will find a home at some point as well. And then, of course, the one after that would be Deep Space Nine. And I've wanted to do that one for a long time because as much as I love all the other shows, I grew up on the original series. If you said to me, "What's your favorite?" my answer is always the original series, at least seasons 1 and 2. But if you say to me, which is the one that you most personally gravitate towards, it's Deep Space Nine. Because Deep Space Nine was kind of dark and edgy, and it was fun, and it was the one that I was really able to sink my teeth into with the writing.
Great background actors.
Exactly, right? They hired all the right people for backgrounds, especially guys with toupees. So that worked out perfectly. And so if I get an opportunity to write the Deep Space book, that would be really exciting for me.
Wow.
So
can you hold up this book? Can you hold up this book one more time so we can spotlight it?
There you go. So Star Trek, the original series is Celebration, right? The Voyager one was first. That did really well, and they said, "Hey, let's do a TOS book." And what's been really exciting, here's where I kind of tread the line between, professional and fanboy. So it was fun to run around and get, Shatner signed this for me, George Takei signed this for me, several of the guest actors, Bobby Clark signed it for me, Sandy Gimple signed it for me. That's really cool. I wish everybody were alive to sign it for me, but that's one of the crazy things about Star Trek. We're talking, 50 something years of history now, getting closer to 60 than we were to 50, right? So, which is crazy. So, yeah.
I mean, even on our show, we've already lost,
Aaron and
Renee and Louise Fletcher, and
right. And we were talking about the Star Trek column that I did. The first piece for the official column, the set visit piece that I did was an entertainment piece that sold well and led them to create the column. The first column was Renee.
Wow.
That was the first one I did, was Renee. And so I've always been thankful to that. And he had told me, I'm sure he did this with you, when he told everybody he was sick. And, he's like, I don't know how long I have. I'm getting treatment, but I'm just going to enjoy it while I can. And he used a lot of that time on conventions. He went on the cruise, all of that. And God bless him, man. He was an interesting man and fascinating.
It's crazy because I just finished watching Deep Space Nine, and Renee went out in real life the way he went out in the show, kind of on his own terms.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going out on my way.
Right.
So definitely a brave and courageous man, the way he handles his things in life.
Yeah. The last email I got from him was somebody took a photo of him on the stage at a convention, and I was in the front row. So the email is called "Where's Waldo?" And there's me looking at him on the stage, looking at me. It was very funny. He was a really cool, interesting man, and a great actor too. Not just.
And next time we talk, Ian, I'm going to ask you about that pinball machine, and Ryan's going to ask you about that sign in the back.
There's so many things.
Yeah.
You guys can cut from here real fast, so you know. This is Gorgar. This was the first talking pinball machine. Okay.
Wow.
So it's a Williams machine from '79, I think it is, and it basically says Gorgar got you. Now break that up. You got Gorgar. Get Gorgar. This kind of a thing. That's all it really says. But it was my favorite machine as a teenager. And when I turned 50, all of my friends chipped in, like $100 each. And I went and found a guy who repairs pinball machines, and he had this machine. So I got this machine. And Ryan, to answer your question, the blue sign up at the top is from the old Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
So when they tore down the old Yankee Stadium, they literally ripped out the seats, they ripped out the bleachers, they tore down everything that you could imagine, and they sold it all. There was an auction company that sold it all. And I was doing their PR. And so part of my deal was you got X amount in cash and X amount in barter product. So literally, this was X amount of hours. I've also got, can you see it?
That's a great piece of history.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
I think I saw Pokey.
Yeah, you see Pokey there. See this?
Yeah.
Refreshments. That's another one.
Men's bathroom.
That's another one from
probably.
That's another one.
Men's
from
refreshments over here.
My favorite piece in my office is from when the Yankees won the 2009 World Series. This is JZ's line of champagne.
Yeah, that is Jay-Z's. That's Jay-Z's champagne, the Armand de Brignac.
Yes. And so this was, fired out and opened and sprayed in the locker room after the Yankees won the World Series in 2009.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
This is my baby. This is one of my favorite pieces.
This guy's got some history right here. This is amazing.
Here's more junk. Romulan Ale.
Hey, I remember that from Cork's Bar in Vegas.
Older. This is from Nemesis. This was the giveaway, the junket swag that they gave out at the Nemesis junket.
Wow.
Now it's a real thing. That was a novelty item that they gave out. Now you can actually buy Romulan ale, and I believe it has the same label.
The one from Quark's Bar in Las Vegas at the Vegas Hilton, it looked exactly like that. I've got some of those. They sold them in a 6-pack, so they must have done exact replicas of Nemesis to sell.
Probably.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Well, tell you what, Ian, this has been a lot of fun. This is really cool. We do have to run, and we do have to have you back because we're going to be talking about way more good stuff. And obviously, you've got a million more great stories that we've just scratched the surface on. We really appreciate you taking the time. You are the gold standard. And
thank you.
We'll see you soon, okay? And everybody at home, thanks for joining us on Virtual TrekCon 4.